Oh no.
Now you want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts.
So if you've been around this channel for really any time at all, there's probably a pretty good chance that you've already figured out what I'm making here. And you might remember that I made one almost exactly like it just a few months ago. Almost exactly like it. In case you haven't guessed, this is a tailstock mounted floating die holder. For those who are unfamiliar, the way these work is really simple. This end here goes in the tailstock of your lathe, and your threading die goes in this end. Now, you can of course save yourself a lot of trouble and just buy one of these on the internet. However, this one is slightly different than those that you'll find on the internet, and I think it's better as well. So, as you may already be aware, threading dies happen to come in a whole bunch of different sizes. And the way that these things normally work, at least all the ones that I've seen anyway, is that when you want to use a die of a different size, for example, this one's made for 1-inch dies. And if you wanted to use a die that was either smaller or bigger than the one that this is made for, the way that it normally works is that you would take this whole contraption apart here, and then you would remove this entire sliding piece, and then change it out for a different sliding piece that has a recess cut into the front that is sized appropriately for whatever die that you want to use. Which, I'll be the first to admit, isn't exactly the end of the world. It's not like it's a monumental task to disassemble this thing and put it back together. However, I figured since I'm cheap and I'm going to be making my own anyway, I ought to at least take a shot at improving that system, which is exactly how version 1 here came into existence. So the whole idea behind this thing was that this floating section would always stay attached to the arbor, and when I wanted to change it out for a different size die, all that I would have to do is detach this front part here, which is just the die holder, and then swap in another one for whatever size die I needed using this magnetic quick change mechanism, which for the most part actually worked pretty well. At least the quick change bit worked really well anyway. The problem with this one comes when you try and thread under power. So when you try and thread with one of these die holders, the die is of course in the front here, and you're going to be twisting the work against that die to create the threads, which is going to in turn attempt to twist this entire sliding bit. However, when you're doing this under power, the amount of friction against this thumb screw actually creates a lot of drag and makes it difficult for this thing to slide forward. And unfortunately, that drag against this thumb screw here was just enough to overcome the force of these magnets, so whenever I tried to thread under power, it would just pull this whole front piece off. Which brings us to version 2.0. As you can see, version 2.0 is now using a dovetail instead of a slot for the quick change mechanism. This is of course thanks to all of the great suggestions that you put in the comments of that first video, so thank you very much for that. This dovetail, like the first one, is going to prevent it from spinning. However, unlike the first one, it's also going to prevent it from being pulled straight out. At the same time, it's going to maintain that quick change mechanism that I was after. So let's head on over to the lathe and I'll show you how well this thing works. All right, so I have the die holder in the tailstock, and we're going to try and put a 3/8/16 thread on this little piece of scrap here. Well, that works perfectly. That's pretty much how I imagined this thing would have worked the first time. So, you know, that's good. In my opinion, if you're a hobbyist and you don't already have a tool like this, I really think that this should probably be among the first tools that everybody makes. Having been in this hobby for, I guess, about 2.5 years myself now, I do really wish that I would have made one of these sooner. If you've ever used a tap or a die, then you know that just in general, they're not very easy to use. You know, they're difficult to get started. It takes a lot of strength to actually create the thread. And even if you're using one on a machine like a lathe or a milling machine, trying to keep it square to the work, having to swing the tap handle over the lathe bed or whatever it is that you're trying to do, just the entire process is cumbersome and not very convenient. And a tool like this, it turns that cumbersome and inconvenient process literally into a 5-second job. I mean, if you compare what you just saw a second ago when I demonstrated this thing with some of my older videos where I'm doing exactly the same thing but with a traditional tap wrench on the same machine, I mean, you can just see how much longer it takes to do it that way than using this thing and just how much more inconvenient it really is. So yeah, I really do think that this should probably be among the first tools that everybody makes. I do have plans for this one available on my Patreon. I haven't yet updated those plans with the dovetail, but you know, you could just use whatever dovetail cutter you have and make whatever size dovetail is applicable for that dovetail cutter. It's really easy. That's what I did. I just used the smallest dovetail cutter I had and cut the dovetail that worked. I will try and get those plans updated, maybe at some point in the next few days or so. So by the time you're watching this, that might not be an issue. But, you know, like I said, you can just use the existing plans and make whatever size dovetail works. On that same note, in this video, I only made this single die holder for 1-inch dies. I do plan on making additional die holders for different size dies, and I was thinking that I might even try making some tap holders as well. I think that it would be pretty cool to be able to have both tap and die holders in the same tool. You know, traditionally you would use something like a spring-loaded tap follower, which I have already made, but I just don't really see why you couldn't use this same tool for taps and dies as well. So I think that might be something that I try in the future. So if you do make one of these, or you know, if you're just interested in that in general, keep an eye out because that will probably be coming up in a future video. If you have enjoyed this video, you can maybe check out this one in the corner here. YouTube seems to think you'll like it. Either way, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one very, very soon.